Hello and welcome to Sold Out. I'm Ian, movie lover and media critic. I'm here with my co-host, Michael. What's up, Michael?
Hey, Ian. How you doing?
I'm doing super.
All right. As you said, I am Michael Smith, former film student. I've been a movie critic for quite some time. I've written for outlets like MoviePass, Examiner, Fansided. But now, super excited to be your co-host here on Sold Out.
I'm super excited to have you as my co-host on Sold Out. Sold Out is the podcast where we see the biggest movies on the big screen, but there's no reserving tickets. There's no picking seats in advance. There's just that old-fashioned thrill of going to the box office, sliding a couple crumpled dollars underneath the glass, and hoping to see the next big thing, only to find out that it's actually sold out. So this week, we are still in 1975. We've traveled there to see Jaws. We watched Rollerball last week. We had mixed feelings.
Were they? Mine weren't very mixed.
They were not very mixed. What else is playing this week?
All right. So last week, we chose Rollerball, thought it looked fun. We were wrong. But I think we have some good choices. We still have Race with the Devil starring Peter Fonda. We have The Drowning Pool with Paul Newman. Paul Newman is always wonderful.
I love Paul Newman.
Yeah.
I really do. Yeah. I'm going to tell you, I think growing up watching movies, my dad was a big movie guy. We had hundreds of VHS. I grew up watching AMC when everybody else watched Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I was watching The Marx Brothers and Spartacus, one of my favorite movies. But I remember watching Cool Hand Luke with my dad. I think it was on Laserdisc. And this was the first time that I saw a movie that suddenly it hit me different. It wasn't just entertainment, but it was life-altering, life-affirming. It made me question the government. It made me question justice. And I was just it really opened my life to cinema.
Yeah, it's interesting. The first time I saw Cool Hand Luke was in high school. I went to a Catholic school and it was in one of my religion classes. But yeah, it was it was a cool introduction. And then we just dove into, questioning faith and morality and, objectivity versus subjectivity and things like that in the context of a religion course.
I feel like you were teeing me up because the other movie that we have a possibility to see today is Love and Death, which questions faith. They specifically talk about objectivity and subjectivity in the film. What's your experience with Mr. Allen?
My experience with Mr. Allen is more limited than I would like it to be. My introduction to Woody Allen was in film school. And really, it started with the Annie Hall era of Woody Allen, right? And so, but my impression of Woody Allen has always been that yes, he can be hilarious, but it's sort of clever in its funniness. So I think Love and Death is the way to go here. Yeah, I think if my impression of Woody Allen, I've seen maybe a half a dozen movies, but they're definitely the kind of on the later side of things.
Okay,
they're never boring.
Well, I would say no, they're not boring. And I think that we are now in a place where there is some moral ambiguity when it comes to watching Woody Allen films and enjoying them. And I think it's worth addressing here on the podcast because...
Yeah, if we're going to dive into a Woody Allen movie, we don't want the cloud over Woody Allen to hover above the podcast.
But the reality is we travel through history and we watch movies on this podcast. And I hope I get to do this with you for years. Yeah. This is a really fun, exciting project that we're doing. I've already gotten to see a movie that I'd never seen before and check that one off the list. I'm excited about the ones in the future. But we're going to encounter filmmakers that have complicated pasts.
Hollywood is not populated with exclusively upstanding citizens.
As most places aren't. And some of them have committed some pretty heinous crimes. And we may encounter their films as well. And so I think it's worth talking about now early in the podcast. And so there's just a couple of things I want to say. We are going to be watching a Woody Allen movie today. We are going to watch Love and Death. I'd love to watch it with you. I'd love to discuss it with you. I think it's a funny movie. I think it's a fun movie. But this is a pod about film history. And whether you can separate art from the artist, it doesn't have the same answer for everybody.
Right.
And we're not going to try to answer that question either. We just recognize that it's complicated. We are going to experience film history as it occurred, regardless of the filmmaker. If for some reason you choose not to listen to this episode, not to watch this film, we respect and understand that decision.
Of course.
But if you do choose to hang out with us, know that Michael and I had a lot of discussion prior to choosing this film. I know it seems like we choose them in the moment. Believe it or not,
We don't.
It's just for
Behind the
fun.
curtain.
Yeah, a little behind the curtain peek. We actually do a bunch of research before we do every podcast. And no, we do not actually have a DeLorean. But I feel
God,
like,
that'd be cool.
I know, I feel like that's our biggest, I think that's what we should be apologizing for. But we are going to watch this film. We are going to discuss it. We are not going to talk about any of the accusations leveled against Woody Allen. We're going to talk about film. We are going to make that decision to separate art from artist.
If we can separate the art from the artist, not defend the artist, but try to at least be objective about the movies themselves. That's going to be our move.
I agree. Tell you what, I think we've covered it enough.
I think so. Let's do something more fun.
You grab the ticks.
I will do
I'll
that.
grab the popcorn.
Let's go to the movies.
Let's go to the movies.
Oddly enough, young Gregor's son was older than old Greg.
Good as war. We kill a few Frenchmen, they kill a few Russians. Next thing you know, it's Easter.
You're the worst soldier I ever seen.
Does this come out from dry cleaning, or is this like gravy?
Look, there's death.
Yes, it is only Don Francisco and his sister.
Yes, the Donessa.
Boris, what happened?
I got screwed. You know, if it turns out that there is a God, I don't think that he's evil. I think that the worst you can say about him is that basically he's an underachiever.
Whew, that was a really good time.
I enjoyed it more than Rollerball.
Well, that's a pretty low bar. I need to stretch my legs and honestly, go get a breather. Let's take a quick break. And then when we come back, we'll discuss Love and Death. Welcome back to Sold Out. We just watched Love and Death. Michael, before we talk about it, break it down. What was Love and Death about?
All right. So in Love and Death, Woody Allen brings us back to the Napoleonic era to explore existence and meaning while lampooning Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. How'd I do with that?
Quite well, actually.
All right. Allen plays our protagonist, Boris. He's a simple Russian villager who spends most of his time pining after his cousin Sonia, played by Diane Keaton, with whom he often debates like lofty philosophical topics. When Napoleon invades Austria, Boris is drafted against his will into the Russian army, where he becomes a bit of an accidental hero and eventually a potential future legend.
So here's where I want to start.
Okay.
Let's talk about death.
Oh, okay.
Yep. We're just going to dive right in. By my count, 8 characters die in this movie.
Like named characters.
Named characters. Because obviously during the war, there's a whole field of unnamed characters. I would like to go through them with you now.
Okay.
The first death, Old Nahampkin. So Old Nahampkin is up putting up a weather vane. He gets called to dinner by Boris's mother. And when she comes, she finds a pile of ashes and says, "You don't look well." He dies of a lightning strike, supposedly. They have actually a very nice funeral, given that he was a servant. So it does give you a sense that these are like some nice bourgeoisie people who live in old Russia, right? I want to talk about Old Nahampkin. I actually want to start with his death because one of the themes I noticed throughout the course of this movie is that death is so meaningless.
Yes. So it's funny. I also...
Death is so funny.
No, but I also noticed that like for a movie called Love and Death that is really about these like existential topics, and we'll get to love, but like neither one of them really exists with the reverence in which we're set up to believe that they would be. Death happens everywhere and is always, I believe always, maybe you'll have an exception for me, kind of just glossed over. Like it just kind of happens and then we move on.
It's often very transactional. In fact, Nahampkin's is just solely meaningless. There's no transaction involved. But so like the next death, right? Vladimir Maximovich, I think is his name. And he fights in the war with Boris. And I think Boris is out there cleaning up the dead or doing what he's doing. He's one of the few people that survived. Vladimir talks to him about returning a ring. He says, "I bought this ring for my love." And Boris assumes, as we do, as a sort of a stand-in for the audience, that he wants the ring to go to his love. No. He wants him to return the ring and, most importantly, get a receipt.
Because he needs to get the deposit back.
Well, no, but there's also tax purposes, remember? And so it's this moment where it's like, you know, what actually happens in life? Oh, it's death and taxes. Yeah. That's what really matters in this world. And so Vladimir's death, absolutely meaningless. He dies for the Russian army and he doesn't, like, in the afterlife. And this is what I love about this movie. Within the comedy, there is a statement about politics, about government, and about class.
Oh, of course.
And this man has given his life purportedly for Russia. And what is he thinking about as a ghost?
He's thinking about getting that deposit back and getting a receipt for his taxes.
Precisely. And so I love his death for that reason. Then we have Voskovec, the herring merchant. This is Sonia's husband. So Sonia, so Sonia marries Voskovec. Voskovec dies cleaning his pistol. So he shoots himself.
Yes.
And to make it just a painful irony, he's planning on fighting to defend Sonia's honor. Now, let's talk about Sonia's honor for a moment.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We don't know how many people she slept with after she marries Voskovec.
It's numerous.
Well, she asked, what does she ask? What, in this area code?
Before that, though, she had like listed a number of names, and Boris is like, whoa, okay, that's enough. And she's like, I just got through the A's.
That's what it is. Well, and she says Asimov, remember? Which, fun fact, Boris, Woody Allen, he, prior to this movie, made a movie called Sleeper, which I did recommend to you, and that we discovered is
unavailable on the internet.
Anywhere. And it's a great sort of silent comedy style film, but it is a sci-fi. And he showed the script to Isaac Asimov before he produced it. And so this was a little nod to Isaac Asimov, which I really enjoyed. So, okay. So those three deaths, Vladimir, Voskovec, Oldna Hampkin, these are sort of the initial deaths of just meaninglessness. Like all of them, they die for nothing. Okay.
Right. Especially because you would think that Sonia's husband dying would actually matter, but that relationship was so meaningless to her that it really doesn't.
Meaningless. And also the three people who were standing by his bed, he also seems sort of meaningless to them. And this is like the comedy of the movie is like, oh, this is all meaningless and it's silly and he's a herring merchant, right? But also, you know, in 12, like 10 to 12, probably in that era because it's the Napoleonic Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're in that rough era, right? People did die all the time and it was sort of meaningless. And so the film is historically accurate, albeit quite silly in the subject matter. Next, these next two deaths are really important to me because they play off of each other so wonderfully. Boris is fired out of a cannon and kills all the French generals. We believe. I mean, he definitely destroys their tent.
I love that we have no idea how he like got into the cannon. Like he's taking a nap. He wanted to take a nap
because he's Bugs Bunny.
And then he woke up and was like, oh shit, I'm in a cannon.
Because Boris is Bugs Bunny. I mean, but I love that the film works really hard to actually look a bit like a period piece. It's the biggest budget movie Woody Allen had ever made. They shot a lot of it on, like, not on location, but in Eastern Bloc Europe and that area, so it would look real. Woody had never shot a film outside of New York before.
Those battle scenes are shot like it's an epic with hundreds of extras. And like you said, it's shot on location-ish, right? Like it's not a sound stage, big sweeping shots. You know, it could have actually been like a period piece war movie in those moments.
Yeah. And they're working really hard to sort of bring you into that moment. And there are comedic beats to take you out of it. But no matter what, for the entire film, Boris is still running around with plastic frame glasses. Yeah. You know, he always wears no matter what. And I just love the sort of silliness that he puts so much effort as a director into making this movie a specific way, but no matter what, he's always going to be Woody Allen.
Yeah, and there are a lot of moments like this that really like where tons of effort put into, you know, making this feel like a legitimate period piece. But then there are these lines of dialogue that like make these contemporary references. There's a comment about you know, something being rarer than like his uncle picking up a check.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, that didn't happen in Tsarist Russia. And then like, you know, it's Woody Allen, right? And so there's this like very like everything Woody Allen does has this like Jewish sensibility to it, but then his character like is unfamiliar with the existence of Jews.
Well, yeah, he has a discussion with the priest about whether God exists or not. And he says, and then he quotes Spinoza. And then I actually love that because it does sort of get into how God is dealt with in this movie, which is whenever God is questioned, it's always just dismissed in this really just unceremonious way. And in this instance, he's saying, well, maybe God doesn't exist because Spinoza writes, and he quotes Spinoza. And the priest's response is, Spinoza was a Jew. And he goes, what's a Jew? And the funny, like, obviously, Woody Allen asking
that question.
What's a Jew? Yeah.
Hilarious.
Is he goes, and he shows him a picture. He goes, do they all have horns?
He says, no, some of them have stripes.
So therefore, there must be a God because Spinoza was a Jew. And then the other great discussion about whether there's God or there isn't God is between him and Sonia and during their first philosophical conversation,
Right.
which I have. So we will now listen to that
Yes,
because
please.
it is the
Any excuse to revisit any moment of this
What
movie.
if we're just a bunch of absurd people who are running around with no rhyme or reason?
But if there is no God, well, then life has no meaning. Why go on living? Why not just commit suicide?
Well, let's not get hysterical. I could be wrong. I'd hate to blow my brains out and then read in the papers they found something.
Boris, let me show you how absurd your position is. All right, let's say that there is no God and each man is free to do exactly as he chooses. Well, what prevents you from murdering somebody?
Well, murder's immoral.
Immorality is subjective,
Yes, but subjectivity is objective.
not in any rational scheme of perception.
Perception is irrational. It implies imminence.
But judgment of any system or a priori relation of phenomena exists in any rational or metaphysical or at least epistemological contradiction to an abstracted empirical concept such as being or to be or to occur in the thing itself or of the thing itself.
Yeah, I've said that many times.
Boris, we must believe in God.
If I could just see a miracle, just one miracle. If I could see a burning bush or the seas part or my Uncle Sasha pick up a check.
So there's the uncle picking up the check there.
Yeah.
But the questioning of God is dismissed with this discussion. Did you make sense? At what point did you stop making sense of that discussion?
I mean, I think the real obvious one was, well, subjectivity is objective. And then Diane Keaton just rolls into lots of SAT words that I don't think had a lot of connection to one another.
Yeah. So I watched this movie, like I said, I was quite a bit younger. I don't remember exactly how old. And I remember thinking, I'm not smart enough to watch this movie. This must make sense.
Yeah.
And I need to read more Tolstoy and Spinoza and, whatever else in order to get to the heart of what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And this is really just them poking fun at the intelligentsia.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's the thing that makes this movie both absolutely hilarious, but it does make it a little bit impenetrable in that it feels like if you haven't read a lot of philosophy and haven't read Russian literature and haven't watched The Seventh Seal, which I will get into because I did watch The Seventh Seal,
Ooh.
then this movie is it feels like you're missing a lot of it.
Right. But then the irony of that is, as illustrated by that clip, is that you're not.
Well, you're missing nothing. You're missing nonsense.
You're missing these things, but the value that you think the movie is attributing to it just doesn't exist.
Precisely. The movie is poking fun at the type of people who speak in this particular manner.
Yeah.
And so this is the other place where God is put away. So I think it's also worth it. I know we're talking about death and I want to get to all the other deaths, but The Seventh Seal. So that was a big inspiration for this film. Woody Allen loves Ingmar Bergman. He comes up in Annie Hall as well, actually, where I think he goes to see some long Swedish documentary or whatever. But I found The Seventh Seal and I was like, I've never watched Ingmar Bergman. I've always watched Woody Allen. I'm curious. What am I missing out on? And one of the big themes in The Seventh Seal, which, by the way, is not a funny movie. It is a movie that is a very intense meditation on death and faith.
Yeah, I wasn't under the impression that it was laugh a minute.
It is not laugh a minute. The closest I would compare it to of films I've seen is it's a bit like La Strada in that there's this sort of allegory around travel and how it's connected to death. Although I think The Seventh Seal is more, wears more on its sleeve what it's actually about. Mm-hmm. So the main character is playing chess with death for the entirety of the film. And when he loses the game, you know that he will die.
Yeah, and the death character inspired the death character in Love and Death, correct?
Yes, and there's a dancing scene that also inspired it. And then again, Woody Allen just loves Ingmar Bergman. But there is this really central theme throughout in which the main character, the knight in The Seventh Seal, just keeps asking for proof. He wants proof of a god. He wants proof to prove his faith. And no one can give it to him. No one can give it to him ever, no matter what. Wherever he goes, even when he talks to death, Death says, I have no answers. I don't even know why you're asking me questions. Of anybody who should know, you would think Death would know, and Death doesn't. And so it is a world that's bereft of God. And it does so in a very dour, dark, Swedish art house way. And Woody Allen has decided to do it in a very silly Mel Brooksian way. Although I don't even know if it's fair to call it Mel Brooksian because he and Mel Brooks work together, of course.
I learned that.
But more, and in honor of, in a Groucho Marxian way.
Yes.
Like, it's a lot of one-liners and silly gags and that covers a world without faith, a world without God, and a world that is full of meaningless death.
Yeah. And it takes place in Russia because he's, doing a send-up of all of the Russian literature. But I also think the
send-up.
The then more contemporary history of Russia becomes relevant to that theme as well. In that, after the Tsarist period, Russia goes into a period of history where there is a lot of death. It is bereft of God. I doubt that in 1975, especially, that was an accident.
I mean, that's a good point. I didn't really think about it in terms of when the film was made. I was more just looking at it through kind of like the comedic and film influences. But you're right, there's some really important historical ones as well. All right. Want to get back into deaths?
Yeah. We're at what? 5?
We're at number 5. This maybe is my favorite death. It happens off screen. It is also meaningless. It is deeply ironic. His brother Ivan.
Oh,
bayoneted by a Polish conscientious objector. His love for his brother knows no bounds. He doesn't mourn him. He doesn't care. And we don't know the content. So if it's a conscientious objector, what I do love about this is it's a really funny joke. But so if he's a conscientious objector, that means he is not fighting in the war.
Well, and the implication is that he's a pacifist.
Well, the implication is a pacifist, but more importantly, the action of being a conscientious objector means that no matter what, even if drafted, you will not fight. So he's not in the army. Ivan is in the army. Ivan is not in Poland. Like, these two characters should be so far apart from one another as to how he upset this conscientious objector.
That's to say nothing of the fact that, there would be no conscientious objectors here.
Well, that goes without saying. But to set this scenario up in which Ivan, who is probably the most likely to survive the war. He seems heroic. He seems strong. He's big. He's healthy.
Yeah, early on, he's really established as sort of the prize of the family, right?
He has animal magnetism. Mm-hmm. Sonia wants to marry him.
Yes.
He not only dies unceremoniously, but he dies presumably from a coward. A coward killed him.
Well, and what I love about this also is it's a 20-second scene where it's just mentioned, it's throwaway. This conversation about how hilarious the joke has been, exponentially longer than the joke itself. And the movie just does that so many times. There's so many of these just one-liners where, especially on my second watch through, because we both, watched this, had such a good time, watched it again. I had to pause the movie on many occasions just to appreciate the absurdity that I just got to experience.
And this is that comedy that is fast one-liners over and over and over again. I'm kind of sad that we'll never watch a Marx Brothers movie on this podcast. They will not fit in to our history. But I love seeing them show up because they're absolutely some of my favorite comedies of all time. And for this very reason, there are all of these little one-liners. One of my absolute favorites is actually about Ivan. So when they're trying to convince Boris to go to war, they sort of make several different appeals to him, right? What about Mother Russia? But then it goes, well, what if a Frenchman comes and rapes your sister? And he goes, I don't have a sister. He goes, well, that doesn't matter. He goes, well, who are they going to rape? Ivan? They'll throw up. Which is, I laugh the hardest at because no one around him is reacting. And this is also in that Groucho Marx vein of humor, which is you get to be this absolutely absurd character and say these absolutely absurd things to these very serious people. Yeah. And but then it gets to move forward. It allows the joke to just keep going and going and going. So the structure of it makes it so that it is a laugh a minute because all the characters around him care about the war. They want to proceed forward. Ivan's death is the funniest death. It truly is because of all of the irony built into that death.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next one is Kropotkin. Kropotkin is the man who's just wandering through the forest. Boris is walking and talking about suicide, and he just sees one of his like neighbors or friends walking along with some woman that's not his wife, and he has died. We don't know
We
how
have no
he died.
idea the circumstances of this death.
But if you had to guess the circumstances of his death, like how do you think Kropotkin died? Because I have a theory.
Oh, I maybe having sex. Alluded to this a little bit earlier in that, it's called Love and Death, but really it contains a lot of death, but it doesn't appreciate death, I guess, or it doesn't, again, it just doesn't give it the weight that is implied by it being called Love and Death, and, ostensibly being about this like philosophical journey through love and death. I'm not sure it really has any love either.
Well, and that's, I actually want to discuss that because I really thought a lot about there is so much death in this world. How much love is there? There's a line in The Seventh Seal that I think also really influenced this movie. As I was watching The Seventh Seal, I was like, this, again, very heavy meditation on death. And the squire of the night is consulting this Smith, whose wife has left him for an actor. And he's crying at the bar and he's saying, I'll kill myself. I'm so sad. And the squire has this very pragmatic approach to life. And he's saying, oh, I'll die. I can't live like this. And the squire says, only a wretched few ever die of love. That feels like that line almost is what inspired this movie, because the question is, what wretched few die of love and how does one die of love?
Right.
Is Kropotkin's death one of love? And this is the other important question for me, is death by love a meaningful death? Because we only have meaningless deaths.
Yeah, I suppose it would be, but it doesn't really exist here.
Well, it does, I think. My theory is that it does. Next death. Napoleon, the imposter. This is another really wonderfully ironic death. He dies as Napoleon, them thinking that he's Napoleon, but he's just another poor serf who dies for the wealthy, right? Yeah. And so, he may as well have died in the war, although he's assassinated in this instance, which then leads into the most important death of the entire film, Boris's.
Which is Boris's death.
And Boris is falsely accused. And this is the one that I might say...
Is he falsely accused?
Well, he doesn't kill.
Conspiracy is a crime, Ian.
Well, he's falsely accused of assassination. Conspiracy is a crime, but I think if they heard the conversations, I don't know if it would qualify as a conspiracy. But he is sentenced for a crime that he does not commit. And that's very important, because he's standing there with a gun and somebody pokes their head out of the armoire and shoots this imposter on the ground, and he is convicted. But why is Boris there? How did this happen? And this leads to love. Yeah. Does Boris love Sonia? Does Sonia love Boris? He does this for Sonia.
Yes. And this is where I think we can sort of transition the conversation a little bit from death to love and their connection. Is any love in this movie omnidirectional, right? Like, I feel like every person who loves someone else, it's unrequited.
Well, there's two great monologues, one at the beginning of the film, one at the end of the film, one by Sonia, then one by Sonia's niece, about these incredibly complex love webs among all of the cousins and people. And so-and-so loves so-and-so, but they can't love them because of this. But then also, so yes, there is a lot of love going unrequited. There's a lot of unrequited love.
Right. And then it begs the question of, then what is love, right? Is love something that can exist in one direction, or is love the coming together of those feelings? And so if he's dying for love, is he dying for love if we're prescribing to that latter definition, or is it something else? Is it the pursuit of something? Is it sort of a yearning for meaning, and then the death becomes very ironic because it comes in that journey?
And that's the thing, is I think he's putting forth that this love between him and Sonia is the one real love in the movie, because it starts unrequited. Then she makes an empty promise to him because she knows that, what's his name, Alexander, is going to kill him. So she's like, whatever, it'll make him happy before he dies. We actually get that little soliloquy from her directly to camera. And it's like, and she kind of weighs it out, but then she starts to feel like she's suffocating even making that promise to him. And then they get married, and she clearly doesn't want to be in the marriage.
Right.
But then there's this evolution in the marriage where they sort of just grow accustomed to each other and enjoy each other's company and become friends. he finds passion in art and poetry. He does do a very funny reference. And again, this is these parts of this movie where it's like how much you have to read to be aware. But he's quoting the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, written by T.S. Eliot. He reads it and he goes, it's too sentimental, and throws it away. It's considered to be one of the greatest poems ever written in modernism. But once he becomes a poet and he gets over his suicidal tendencies, I think love exists between him and Sonia. I think it's temporary, but I think it exists.
Well, she does say, in that final scene of the movie, that it was her one great love.
Mm-hmm.
And even that is sort of played for laughs because we have this whole history of him just pining after her just making her way through Russia.
Is that how we're going to put it?
That's how I'm going to put it.
Because we're not going to slut shame Sonia.
We don't do that.
No, we don't do that.
Not that kind of podcast. She should get hers. And then, they get married. She doesn't really want to be there. It's all of this stuff. But then at the end, in death, she reflects and says that he was her one great love. And I wonder, are we supposed to take that earnestly? Like, are we supposed to take that literally?
I think that there is evidence that that's true, because their relationship right up until basically she flees, when they are conspiring together, when they're working together, and when he decides to become a poet, they're in a happy marriage. Like, they have a good relationship. They're friends with one another. They seem to love one another. So I do believe that. And I do, obviously, it's played for laughs, as you said. He goes, oh, thank you. That's really wonderful now that I'm dead to know that.
Yeah. And if I had to answer the question that I asked you,
the question,
I would say that what's happening in that moment is we're coming to the conclusion that yes, love is real. Yes, perhaps love is the meaning of life, even though it then becomes sort of meaningless in death. But that we don't understand what love is. That we're pursuing love, but we're pursuing this thing that actually isn't love. And that what Boris and Sonia find is what love actually is, which is not this like grand romantic thing. It's this companionship. It's the fact that it's the one relationship that sort of survives through various phases of life. They're together in the beginning, they're together in the end. And so that would be my sort of theory of the case here, is that, love and death do have meaning, but by presenting it in such a meaningless way, it's showing us that we are just misdefining it.
Well, I mean,
or these characters are misdefining it.
Well, the characters, and I would say, so Sonia attempts to define it. Early on, she talks about spirituality, intellectual connection, animal magnetism. We know that she and Boris have an intellectual connection. We know they don't have a spiritual connection. She believes in God. He does not, or at least kind of doesn't.
Yeah.
Doesn't want to find out that he's wrong. And there's no animal magnetism there. And so she presents that.
But do they even have the intellectual connection, right? Because the clip that we played is their intellectual connection, and it's complete gobbledygook.
It's gobbledygook, but I think they both find joy in the conversations because they have them multiple times.
Yeah.
They talk to each other. Like, their conversations tell me that yes, they do have the intellectual conversation. And it's like, that's the hard part, is they're playing it all for comedy. And so you have to sort of separate these things. And we're talking about this very silly comedy. But I think the movie invites you to do that. Like, you get to laugh about it, but then you get to walk away and be like, there was actually a lot of layers.
Oh, yeah.
That are happening in this film that explore these topics in really important ways. And it's why I started counting deaths, because I was like, well, you know what? Actually, like, the movie's so silly, you don't realize that so many important characters die so many meaningless deaths.
Yeah.
Because it is everywhere, and it doesn't matter what you do, whether you love, whether you don't love, whether you're a wretched fool who dies of love, whether you choose to die for your country. It all just ends up in death. It's the choice between having to eat those really rich foods or not.
Yeah.
Is the difference in, fighting for one side or the other. The rest of it doesn't matter.
Well, yeah, and this is not my thought. I can't remember where it came from, but it's, the best case scenario for life is that you live long enough for everything you love to die, and then you die yourself.
I think I'm gonna have to end the podcast now. My existential dread wavers throughout life, but those kinds of sayings make it very, very present for me. What I love about all of his interactions with the Countess is that This is right before he goes to war. He is vocally against going to war. He does not want to die. There is nothing more unappealing to Boris than dying, period. Doesn't want to die. Not sure about the afterlife. Doesn't think there's a God. Definitely does not want to enter into the unknown. He is told, if you attempt to get anywhere near the Countess, you will die.
I will kill you.
Somebody else tells him he will kill you. He doesn't even get told by Alexandra that he'll kill him. He knows for a fact, and he says, "Oh, then I'll keep my distance." And the first thing he does when the opera is over is go and talk to the Countess.
Who is this attractive and mysterious soldier?
Boris Grushenko. Ooh, sorry. Goose that lady.
He has quite a sensitive face, hasn't he?
That's just the part of me that shows.
Grushenko. Isn't he the young coward all St. Petersburg is talking about?
Not so young. I'm 35.
The one who is so afraid for his own safety that he's reluctant to defend his country.
He is in a bad mood, isn't he? What's the matter? Don't you like your seats?
You must visit me for tea someday. I'm sure we'd have a lot to talk about.
It's okay with me. I'll bring the tea bags. You could run a quick check on your erogenous zones. But what about the Dybbuk?
Why do you persist in taunting me in public? If you so much as come near the Countess, I'll see that you'll never see the light of day again.
If a man said that to me, I'd break his neck.
I am a man.
Well, I mean, a much shorter man.
So there's a lot of really funny one-liners in there, but the fact that he says, "I'll run a check on your erogenous zones" in front of the man that he knows will kill him for this, but he fights tooth and nail to not go to war. What is Boris willing to die for? Or is this the separation between body and mind? Is this his ego and his id? He can't control that he wants to have sex. He cannot control that he wants to fuck.
Yeah.
And because he can't control it, he is going to be led directly into like the gates of hell.
It brings us back to then, I think, the misunderstanding of love, right? Because he's a character who seems to be motivated by love.
I think he's motivated by sex. Tell me more. Like, why do you think in his view he's motivated by love?
Well, I think that he loves Sonia or feels what he believes is love for Sonia. And
I'd agree with that.
Much of the choices he makes, the things he does, the things that are actual choices, a lot just happens to him accidentally. But they do seem kind of motivated in pursuit of Sonia, or he always seems to circle back to Sonia.
Sure, but his I guess in his pull to the Countess is what I'm talking about. Like, do you think that that's motivated by love?
I mean, it's motivated by sex.
Okay.
I'm just not convinced that he knows the difference.
Oh, I see. So you don't think he can tell the difference between his relation with Sonia and with the Countess?
Yeah, I think he just like feels a thing and thinks that thing is love.
Okay. I don't know if I agree. Yeah, that's okay.
You don't have to.
Yeah, I don't have to. No, it's okay. We can occasionally disagree. I think we actually spend a lot of time agreeing. Yeah, and this brings us really to the final scene. God, we've been talking about this movie for a good stretch of time now, but his death by love is an attempt to kill Napoleon, and we finally get to see a government leader. Now, Boris has been theorizing for the whole movie, what do leaders think of us? What's important to them? And he thinks that they're all full of shit.
Yeah, what are we fighting for?
Yeah, what are we fighting for? What matters to them? He mostly talks about food. Like I said, they're going to make us eat rich foods.
Yeah, that, what's going to change? It's just going to be more of the same, but Frencher.
And we get an insight into that.
No. It's not what I had in mind. It should have more cream between the crust and no raisins.
But at our last meeting, you said raisins.
No! If this pastry is to bear my name, it must be richer, more cream.
Yes, but is there time?
Very little. My spies tell me that my illustrious British enemy is working on a new meat recipe, which he plans to call Beef Wellington.
It will never get off the ground.
We must develop the Napoleon before he develops Beef Wellington. The future of Europe hangs in the balance.
Yes, Your Highness.
Boris is right.
It's all about the rich food.
These very powerful people are sending thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people to their deaths for vanity, for ego, for changing food so that his name can be attached to it. And this is why now we know why all of those other nameless people died.
Yeah.
For the Napoleon.
The Napoleon.
Have you ever had a Napoleon?
No, but I have had quite a few beef Wellingtons. They're delightful.
I've never had a beef Wellington, but I will tell you that in the spring, Tower Cafe does a Napoleon with fresh berries.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
French culture won. Clearly, that's why we are speaking French now.
Exactly.
Exactement.
I hate you.
I know you do. So, but I do think like this scene is so funny, but it actually does summarize. Everybody's been theorizing what's going on at the highest ranks of power, whether it's God, whether it's the afterlife, whether it is in government power, and we finally get a glimpse into what's happening. And like I said, Boris is truly right.
Yeah, and I think that if we are to take kind of that final scene with Sonia and Boris after his death, we accept that is true love, right? Then that I suppose is the theory of the film, right? Is that the big stuff that's happening all around us isn't what's meaningful. It's the little stuff within our own sort of insular existence, the relationships that we have, and that context, and being important and significant aren't important or significant. What ultimately matters is, like you said, that very small period where in death, the thing that is appreciated are those moments of true love that are not big, they're not significant in the grand scheme of things. People would think that they are unimportant. Boris has had a life where he has done things that people did perceive as important, and we learn that they're not, they were accidental. And yeah, it's a hilarious movie. It's a great time, but it does have something, I think, really sweet to say when it's all said and done.
Yeah, 100% agree. That feels like an excellent place to stop.
Yeah.
We'll nominate our MVPs. I'm very excited to share with you mine.
I'm excited to hear it.
Well, let's take a quick break, and we'll be back with more Sold Out.
We're back. All right, Ian. We talked a lot about love and death. We both loved this movie to death. Yeah.
I liked it. All right.
And now it is time to kind of figure out, of all the things that we loved, who our MVP of the movie is.
Go first.
You want me to go first? I know you're very excited about yours.
Excited.
All right.
I'm so excited.
So my MVP of the movie, anytime you have a movie that's like really from an auteur, it's too easy to say that the MVP is that auteur, right? Woody Allen wrote, directed, starred. His voice exists throughout this entire movie. My MVP is not Woody Allen. My MVP is Diane Keaton. She really, in a movie that feels so much like a Woody Allen movie, right? Like this thing is Woody Allen's. She is the one who kind of can take on scenes all by herself. She steals some scenes that she's in with Allen right next to her. You mentioned before we started recording that, Woody Allen, I think, is pretty precious about his scripts, but let her improvise a bit in this. And her line delivery is just so good. Like, she gets the timing perfect. And she hits these like slapstick moments very, very well. Just any moment she's on screen is really delightful and a highlight of the movie for me.
Everything you said is right. And I was this close to making Diane Keaton my MVP as well. But then I knew you would make Diane Keaton your MVP. And I thought, what a boring conversation we'll have about our MVP when we could have such a fun one if I choose to nominate Zvi Schooler.
Zvi Schooler.
Immigrated to the U.S. in the early 20th century and was on stage for many years. Known for his rabbinic beard, playing many Jewish characters. Was in the stage production of Fiddler on the Roof, then in the film, directed by Norm Jewison. He plays Boris's father with the plot of Land.
Which I can't believe we didn't mention the plot of Land until now, because it is such a just delightful gag.
Zvi is in the movie so little, but you can remember every single line. He is so in character, so over the top. He is fantastic. Of all of the side small characters, he is by far the most memorable, by far the funniest. I love how intense he is. I love how sincere he is. I love when Boris is trying to get out of the war. He's like, you brought shame to our family. The energy that he brings to every single scene. Zvi Schooler was fantastic. I was like, I do not recognize this person at all. I have to look into him because he is just electric on screen. And it makes sense. He acted almost his entire life, starting on stage from when he immigrated up through like World War I era, all the way up through these films. He didn't do very many films. That was mostly stage, which I think is unfortunate. I really think we were robbed because what a great comedic actor. And he did a lot of comedy and drama over the course of his career. But I'm going Zvi. As much as I love Diane Keaton and agree with everything you said about her, she also was given a lot of freedom. The Zvi was given, I mean, that guy was given like 8 lines. Yeah,
he didn't do a lot, but what he did, as you said, is super memorable. And he got that plot of land, which really, like, as far as like the dumb gags in this movie go, there's a lot of them. It really is. It might be the best one.
One day I will build on it.
And then he does.
And then he does build on it. And he's the only person crazier than Boris. All right. How are you feeling about 1975 so far?
I mean, so far it's obviously, we're 1 for 2.
Hey, we're batting 500.
Yeah, we're batting 500. If this were a baseball game, we'd be proud of ourselves.
Absolutely.
You know, I love that we are traveling through time in an attempt to see the biggest movie events of the last 50 years. My like first impression 10 minutes into this movie was like, oh, this is a lot more like Mel Brooks and Groucho Marx than I thought Woody Allen was going to give me. And that's an experience that I wouldn't have if we didn't travel to 1975. And so I think, if I had to say, like, I'm glad to be here, and I can't wait until we finally get to see Jaws.
I am right there with you. So I have absolutely loved chatting Love and Death with you. This has been really fun. It's been fun seeing you get to experience a pre-Annie Hall Woody Allen movie because they actually are some of my favorites. I hope one day you get to see Sleeper.
Plan to figure that out logistically. I'm going to have to find like a used DVD or something. All right. And with that, thank you everybody for joining us here on Sold Out. I had a great time. Hope you had a great time as well. We hope that you join us next week where we will hopefully be chatting Jaws. And in the meantime, make sure and follow us online. We are at soldout_pod pretty much anywhere you look. I am Michael_upleft almost anywhere you look. Visit us at upleftmedia.com and look for Ian. Where, Ian?
I'm at Ian_upleft pretty much everywhere.
Fantastic. With that, we're signing off. See you next week.
See you next week on Sold Out.
Sold Out is an Upleft Media production. Hosted, written, and produced by Ian Tarter and Michael Smith. Edited and sound engineered by Ian Tarter. With special thanks to Rosie Page.